Now, from CBS 4 News, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Good morning, I'm Jim DeFede, and welcome to Facing South Florida. There are just 44 days left before the midterm election, and no race is being more closely watched than Florida's race for governor. This morning, we will show you an interview I did on Thursday with the Republican nominee, Ron DeSantis, the conservative former member of Congress who won his party's nomination thanks largely to the support of Donald Trump. We spoke about his education plan, the federal response to Puerto Rico, and why DeSantis continues to call his opponent, Andrew Gillum, a socialist. But we also discussed the allegations of racism that have dogged his campaign. These are his most extensive comments on the matter. Later in the interview, we are joined by his running mate, Miami State Representative Jeanette Nunez. But here first is my interview with Ron DeSantis. Congressman, thank you for sitting down with us again.
Great to be here.
And thank you for accepting our debate invitation.
I'm ready for it. Let's do it.
All right. I hope Andrew Gillum accepts as well.
Sure.
All right. So I want to get to a number of things. I know you released your education plan this week. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about some of the other issues. But I have to start with something that's in the news. There was a story today. We're taping this on Thursday about one of your donors, Stephen Allenbeck, who posted some vile racist tweets. I guess what I want to get a feel for, you've immediately distanced yourself from him, but what was your reaction to those tweets, and how well do you know Mr. Allenbeck?
Well, they were vile tweets. It's unacceptable. I mean, I don't do social media personally because there's so much garbage on it, and I just hate seeing all the vitriol. What he said was unacceptable, and that's just the end of it. But we obviously had no agency in that at all, and it really has nothing to do with me. So let's just focus on the issues. I can't control other people's social media. I'm happy to answer questions about anything we put out or any of my statements or positions.
The only other point I'll raise about this is, are you afraid that this is starting to build, that the Democrats can build a narrative against you along this line?
A demagogic fake narrative. I mean, give me a break. I mean, I'm somebody that, I have an impeccable record of service to our country in a variety of ways. If you're in a place like Iraq, like I served, you put on the uniform, you're a team. You don't deal with race. You don't deal with creed. You're all in it together, and everybody is equal. And that's the way I was brought up, and that's the way I've conducted my professional life. End of story. I don't want a single voter in Florida to vote against Andrew, or even me for that matter, because of race. Do it based off leadership, do it based off vision, and do it based off who you think could be a good governor.
All right. And I know education point, and I promise we'll get to it next, but the other story this week was that there was reporting that President Trump is angry at you for you distancing yourself and your campaign distancing from the Puerto Rico estimate. Your campaign put out a statement essentially saying that you did not believe the 3,000 figure from the GWU study was inflated. There's reporting that the president is angered by that. Have you spoken to the president at all?
So look, I have no reason to question these figures. It was a catastrophic storm. It hit a very vulnerable island that had very poor infrastructure. And I worked with Jennifer Gonzalez, the resident commissioner there, and working with the president. The president green-lighted everything that we asked for, but it was a very difficult thing. So I'm not going to sit there and nitpick on who didn't die or that died. I don't think that's the right thing. I think what we need to do is focus on what else do we have to do to get Puerto Rico back. As bad as the storm was, the money that we've dedicated there could potentially build the place to have a better infrastructure, and it could be a springboard for them to get their house in order fiscally and be more prosperous, but we've got to keep our eye on the ball. So let's move forward. I've been a big supporter of the island over my time in Congress, and I just want to keep doing that, but I don't want to quibble and try to downplay the significance of the storm.
But the issue as to whether or not the president is angry with you, have you spoken to him? Have you gotten any indication that the president is angered?
I don't discuss the conversations that I have with the president publicly.
But can you say that you've spoken to him in the last few days?
I'm not going to say either way.
Okay. Let's talk about your education plan. You came out with an education plan. I think this is one area where it shows pretty stark differences between your approach to education and Andrew Gillum's approach to education. One of the key points of your plan is that you want to, I don't know if it's compel, but essentially provide that 80% of all education dollars will be spent in the classrooms. Talk to me a little bit about that and your broader education vision.
Well, I think we have a need to recognize that ultimately what makes education tick are not the bureaucrats, but the teachers and the students, and that's where we want the resources to go. And so my plan is going to be get us to that 80% level. That means we're stretching the dollars we already have more, but then we're also going to be looking to do more bonuses to reward good teachers, to recruit new teachers, because I think that is something that's important. But my plan makes sense sense with how Florida actually funds education. You know, Andrew Gillum's plan, now obviously he wants $1 billion tax increase, which will really hurt our economic momentum and cause all sorts of problems. But the way you don't set teacher salaries from Tallahassee, they're set by the school district. The FEFP, you know, that's Florida's contribution, but to say you're going to have this $50,000 or whatever the floor is going to be, that's not really how it works. And so I think my plan shows that we understand how funding is actually done in Florida. It's workable. His plan is not workable, and I think ultimately it wouldn't be successful.
So let's talk a little bit about what you said with regard to Andrew Gillum. He wants to raise the corporate tax rate by about 2 points, and as a result be able to, among other things, raise $1 billion and provide for a minimum teacher salary of $50,000 a year. Aren't teachers worth $50,000 a year?
Not going to be able to do that from the state level. That is going to be done at the local level, whether they decide to put the money into teacher salaries or not. Here's the thing. It won't raise $1 billion because you are basically putting a stop sign up to other businesses who are looking to move to Florida, and you're going to have them reevaluate whether they want to do that. And remember, it's not just a 40% tax rate, which is stiff and significant and would make us much less competitive with other states. This is a guy that when he was asked in the primary at Jacksonville University, are you a socialist or are you a capitalist? Did not give a straight answer. He hemmed, he hawed, but he never said he was a capitalist. So think about if you're looking to invest in Florida. With Ron DeSantis, you know, take it to the bank, no tax increases. You know you're going to have a welcoming environment for business. With Andrew Gillum, you got to think about, okay, $1 billion, 40% tax increase, and won't even say that he's a capitalist. Is Florida the place I want to go? So I think he would totally undercut our economic momentum. You would end up raising less revenue than he forecast, because you're going to have less economic activity. It would be a historic mistake to do a 40% tax increase.
The other part of your plan, I noted, calls for increased spending on things like charter schools. Why do you believe that's a good recipe as opposed to investing that money more into public schools?
Well, charter schools are public schools. I mean, you know, you have the ones managed by the school district, then you have public schools that are managed by other entities, and what they can do is they can fill a need that may not be met by a school district. And in Miami-Dade County, for example, you have almost 70% of the students in K through 12 now go to a school other than the one they were zoned for. So me, I grew up in Dunedin, Florida. I'm in Dunedin, I'm zoned for Dunedin, that's kind of it. Between public magnets, which I'm supportive of, between public charters, between homeschooling, and then tax credit scholarships where people can go to private schools, you have a huge, huge majority of students in Dade who are taking advantage of that. I think in the 21st century, in a diverse state, and even diverse counties like Miami-Dade, one size fits all is not going to work. And so, for example, I've had a chance to visit the LBC Academy here in Miami. It was chartered by the Latin Builders Association, and so it's a heavily minority student population. These kids are being taught standard high school curriculum, but with a focus on the construction industry and associated trades. So they're going to be able to graduate LBC and potentially have a job right out of high school. Some will go to college and then come back in the management capacity. So it's a discrete need. It's a smaller school. And here's the deal: if you're not answering a market need, then people just aren't going to go there.
Well, one of the things, though, that critics of charter schools will say is that they don't play by the same standards. There's not the same level of transparency. There's not the level of accountability with charter schools. I know the Orlando Sentinel, for instance, recently did a series, you know, in your part of the state that sort of really criticized the way charter schools were being run and operated, and that lack of accountability. How do you spend more money in an area that the state really doesn't have good control on?
Well, first of all, I mean, there's problems also in the district managed schools, I mean, in different directions. I mean, so you can definitely point to examples of charters that haven't been successful. You can also point to examples where they have been very successful. We have 250,000 students roughly statewide who are in public charter schools. And here's the thing, Jim. Nobody is being forced to go there. That's just the reality. And so if they're not serving a need, I don't think that parents would want to send their kids there. So at the end of the day, it's who do you trust? I trust the parent to know what's best for their particular child, whether that's going to the district school that they're zoned for, whether it's trying to go to a magnet school, whether it's a public charter, whether it's some other thing. I just want to have the parents have the maximum amount of options so that they can tailor the education to their children's needs.
Let's talk about your opponent for a second. He's currently currently, there is currently an FBI investigation in Tallahassee, long-running investigation, focusing on the manner of government there. He says that he is not the target of the FBI investigation. Do you accept that he's not the target, and should that even be an issue in this race?
So why is he going on these junkets to New York and Costa Rica? You have undercover FBI agents involved. You know, he was asked, can you produce receipts? So he produces a $400 bank statement that he withdrew from the ATM, saying that's what he paid for a luxury Costa Rica villa for 4 nights. Jim, I'm a Hilton Honors member. I can't even get the Hampton Inn for 4 nights for $400. And so that doesn't even pass the laugh test. And then in the document he released, they tried to black it out. There was a $15,000 deposit into this checking account, which he did not disclose on his financial disclosures. And he said it was a transfer from a savings, but we know that's not true because it would have come up different. So where did this money come from? I mean, I've heard of the Immaculate Conception. Is this the divine deposit that just happened to land into his bank account? He's got a lot of explaining to do, but here's the thing. Tallahassee is poorly run, irrespective of that FBI investigation, which I think is very serious. I mean, this is a guy that's presiding over the highest crime in Florida 4 years running. He's been a self-serving politician. When he was on the city commission in Tallahassee, he voted to give himself tens of thousands of dollars in extra retirement benefits, and then turns around and votes for higher property taxes as both a commissioner and as mayor. So you're either in this to benefit taxpayers and to serve, or you're in it to benefit yourself. And I think Andrew has proven he's somebody who's in it to benefit himself.
That's a pretty strong accusation to make, that he's in it for personal gain, isn't it?
Well, how many politicians vote to give themselves benefits? When I
well, there's politicians. I mean, you know, there are plenty of politicians who work at the local level who you know, it's a work hard.
It's a conflict of interest, and you're not saying for taxpayers. So when I got to Congress, I told my constituents, I'm not accepting perks. So I got there, I declined the subsidized health care, I declined the congressional pension, and then when they were trying to increase congressional pay, the first bill I passed in Congress was to stop it. We stopped the pay increase for members of Congress. And so that's how I've conducted myself. When he is voting to give himself extra benefits, or he raised parking fees in Tallahassee by 100%, but yet he used a free parking pass to park at the airport when he's doing all his political travel. So higher fees for people in Tallahassee, more benefits for himself. That is unacceptable.
When we come back, part 2 of my interview with Ron DeSantis as he's joined by his lieutenant governor candidate, Jeanette Nunez from the 305.